Okay, so some fixes in yellow here. If I put the I into the second one, I should not put into the first one. I have no idea. Okay, well, I only tried the ones where I was 0. But there is no I here, so this is just ck minus j. I'm running forward on the first one, so that means that j is now taking the row of I. And running backwards on the second one, so I'm doing I minus j here. So that's what was wrong there. Nothing wrong here, yay, except for I wasn't very friendly in choosing my notation, because I'm basically having I and j change roles, which is not so nice for the picture. So if you now identify I and j, well, swap them, then we have here an expression c k minus j, like up there. And the second one is still the difference. So there's j, which is our counter, corresponding to the I up there, and then it says minus j. So that would be minus I here. So there is some number, well, minus 1 here, so that's a minus j. There's some number and another k. Now this j is some random thing, we're now shifting it by k. So in general, we're taking j plus k is some number larger than 0, and that's the I up there. The I is on the outside, and so that is the sum which runs from 0 to infinity. So this guy, well, was 0 here, so it's still 0 here. So it means that for each of the xi, the coefficient in front of it gives 0. So thus, each coefficient of si for I greater or equal to k is 0, and we're done with the claim. Now I have another claim which I'll, I think, skip proving. Namely that the characteristic polynomial is the minimal, or is the polynomial of smallest degree such that p of x star times s of x is a polynomial of degree less than k. So if somebody gives you such a polynomial, then you know that is the characteristic polynomial. So normally you have an infinite sequence, or sorry, an infinite sequence giving you an infinite power series. You multiply by any polynomial and you get something infinite. Now, of course, all multiples of p of x will also give you a finite polynomial. And the smallest of all of these polynomials, that's the characteristic polynomial. So let's skip this proof. And now we're going on to the sequence over there. So the sequence, if you're taking si plus ti, so that one comes from well, this long sequence si plus ti x to the I I equals 0. Such a thing is called generating polynomial, generating sequence. Now we can just split this up into the si part and the ti part. And we're going to use that if you have the sum over the si, this was our capital S of x, that is equal to some polynomial, we have a name for it. Let's call this thing f of x divided by p of x. This one will start. So we have that p of x times s is f of x and then equivalently this t of x is going to be some g of x divided by q of x star for f of x g of x polynomials of degree, well, polysquiz. So we know that f of x is the degree of f is strictly less than the degree of p, and we know that the degree of g is strictly less than the degree of q. So these come from the claim above. So the claim over here was that if you take p star times s, you get this polynomial. So we call this guy now f for the first of the sequences, and we call it g for the second of the sequences. Then if I have this sum of the x si plus ti xi I equals 0 to infinity, but that's the same as s of x plus t of x. So I split them up again. Now I'll write them with their fractions. So this is going to be f of x divided by p of x star plus g of x divided by q of x star Now we'll bring on the same denominator. And now that's finally where the LCM comes in. So that is finally getting us closer to the claim of the theorem. So this is something where the denominator is going to be the LCM of P of x star and Q of x star. And then there are some polynomials, a of x times f of x plus b of x times g of x, where we just have that, well, a comes from the part that we need to get to take care of the q, and b is what we need to take care of the p. So there will be one more expression there, but I first should define what the a and b's are. So I have that the LCM of P star Q star is equal to, so here we have to multiply by A A times P star is equal to B times Q star. So that's what we need to bring them all on the same denominator. I hope you're following, because else I'll make mistakes again. Now the last thing is, I briefly motivated how the star works, and that you can take it on the outside and move it around. When you take two polynomials and compute the LCM and then apply star, that's the same as if you first apply star, then compute the LCM, and then compute the LCM. So this is the same as the LCM of P of x, Q of x, and then apply the star. And then some polynomial up here, so it doesn't change. So with a claim up there that all we need is to have a polynomial which is degree less than degree of this LCM, we're essentially done. We just need to argue that this one is a polynomial of degree less than this one. Now, these guys all have the same degree. So the degree of AP star is the same as the degree of BQ star is the same as the degree of the LCM of P and Q. Well, that's not a surprise because those expressions are the same. But now each of these, this one here is larger than the degree of A times f of x. Give me out the x's now. So the degree of f is less than the degree of p, so also true for the product. This one here is larger than the degree of p times g. Now if you add two polynomials, then the degree doesn't change. I mean, it might go down. So this one is larger than the degree of a f plus b g. And then using the claim above, that actually I should it's not just the sorry, I should fix this up there. Is the we don't need this. Because I put in k there, it's not the smallest. So if I hadn't put k, which is the order of the LFSR, then I would need smallest degree. This is like one of the steps if I wanted to prove it. One can prove, it's given here, that if you fix k, which is the length of the LFSR, then the characteristic poly is unique. So using the claim that the characteristic polynomial the smallest degree, well, the characteristic polynomial is unique with giving the poly degree. Strictly less than its degree. Okay, so with some gaps, I really want to get to the next part. Yes?
There's a Q in the top right corner, which is supposed to be a G, I think.
Yeah, that better be a G. This was a G, it should still be a G here. I don't know what it is about this proof. I got stuck in it last year, so this year I went like, wrote every single piece out on paper, and I get stuck again. Somehow, it's not nice. On the other hand, we now know more about how LFSRs work. So, now we can handle if we have an LFSR where is characters a polynomial. So here you character a polynomial which splits into some polynomials fi. There can be some exponent ei with fi irreducible, ei greater than 1, greater equals 1 in Z. So if you have such a split, or I should also say fi is not equal to fj. Or I equal to j. So you do a unique factorization of polynomials, you sort it into powers. Now we know that we can study each of them separately and then look at the LFSR, well, look at the parts of this LFSR as coming from addition of such sequences. So you can study by studying these fi to the ei separately. Now I motivated this whole thing by saying we would like to have something which gives us a stream. And LFSRs are definitely much nicer than carrying around an infinite sequence that we wouldn't need, say, for the one-time head. But are these guys actually good? After all this has been said, so problems with LFSRs. If you know that the sequence is coming from LFSR, say, you know what the polynomial is, you don't know what the initial state is, or you know something, you don't know everything. If you know f of x, if you know this, if you know p of x, and you're getting some output sequence of the length k, you can just continue. So, knowing the polynomial p of x and having si plus 1 to si plus k minus 1. So we have some subset of the sequence. We can go arbitrarily backwards and forwards. So there we're using this part. And now I shouldn't use I here because, well, this is some index, so let me put j here, and then say plus I. So now if I have si plus 1, then I have accepted the sequence. So I can recover the next one. I can also go backwards. So if you observe some long stream, say if you have the ciphertext and you know what plaintext they came from, you just XOR those, then you know what the key stream is, and you're done. Now, is it more secure if the polynomial secret? Well, of course it is, but not much. So, not knowing P of X but knowing K, how can we recover something? Anybody? So, knowing P means knowing the coefficient Ci. Let's assume we don't know Ci. Can we still get information about the Ci? So remember that we have this Si plus 1 is equal to Si times this matrix C. Now this matrix C was this big matrix 0, 1, 0, 1 under the diagonal, all 0 here, all 0 here, C0, C1, CK minus 1. So remember what I was doing with this earlier today. I was not using Si here, I was using a big matrix here. So I was collecting a bunch of those and then inverting stuff, moving things around. So simply I could say, okay, well, if I know Si plus 1 and I know Si, I get one relation about the Ci. Well, it's exactly the same as up there. I do this for the next one, next one, next one, next one. Each time I get one relation, so I get a linear system of equations. So doing this for with 2k plus 1 known and also subsequent so if I know 2k minus plus 1 of those, so I have the state, k elements, and I shift and shift and shift, then I can just reconstruct all of the equations. So I get k equations I should just need 2k in the k unknowns the top one, sorry, I don't need plus one. In the k unknowns ci. I know that ck is 1. And I should call this si and this is cj. So if you look at one of the previous exams or such, this is something you can easily figure out. Now, if you don't even know k, then you remember what we learned when we were breaking the Vigenère cipher. Well, if you don't know what k is, you start breaking it for k equals 1. Well, doesn't quite work. You start breaking for k equals 2. So you try solving it, you get that many output bits, you get a few more, and you see whether your solution to the first 2k actually predicts the next one's correct. So take 2L coefficients, well, outputs, recover matrix, let's call this thing CL, and then we test with the next output. And you do this until there is no contradiction. So if you just take 2L elements, you will always recover a unique matrix. Now then for the next ones, you assume this is the correct matrix, and then you iterate and iterate and iterate, and usually after the next one step you'll get a contradiction if it wasn't correct, or after 2 steps or 3 steps. So it doesn't take long to figure out what's wrong. So that makes it sound pretty unhappy. So in practice, we're using those slightly different from here. We do another output filter. So in practice, we use LFSRs with a nonlinear component so for example, there's a stream cipher grain, which is relatively recent and in use now, that has a LFSR over here and has a nonlinear NFSR part over here. And now these guys have some coefficients, so there's a feedback polynomial, and it goes in here. And then the LFSR feeds into, so there's this nonlinear feedback thing, which has its output, and then these two get XORed and fed back into that. You see where all the tabs are. Then the other thing is, what do we know? Output is partially coming from here. I put it here because it takes that coefficient. So we're not taking the output of the NFSR, that one is just fed back. But this one goes into a function here. So there's another function h of x, which takes 4 pieces from here. So these are 4 fixed positions. And it takes 1 fixed position there. And then finally, the output is also used to XOR with the output of h. And so this one is the output. Now this one is trying to make things a lot more complicated. The basic thing that we have analyzed now is how this LFSR works. And so if I give you the polynomial of this thing, you can very quickly tell me what sequence it has and so on. But then the output is not used directly, it is used for one thing to drive a nonlinear feedback shift register. And it's also the intermediate positions are used for some polynomial here. So this is a nonlinear polynomial, there's some function going on there. 5 inputs, 4 from the LFSR, 1 from the NFSR, and we get the output. Now the LFSR is the cheap component, this one is slightly more expensive. So you're getting your long period and such from the LFSR, and you're getting nonlinear properties from over here. But there are enough designs out there but we still use designs that are mostly based on LFSRs. So when you have a cell phone, and I guess many of you do, I see some of you using it right now, but if you're using your cell phone not for browsing the web, but for actually calling somebody, so then you're making a connection to a cell tower. And then there's voice, which is kind of some vague frequency, but then this frequency gets digitized, and there actually is some form of encryption. Now this encryption is called, well, the suite is called A5. It's in the GSM standard. So it's the A5 suite in GSM. There's an A51, which is very close to what we did today. So A51 is an interesting design with lots of spooky stories about how it came about. Like this is Cold War times, the British and the French, and then here also the Dutch were afraid of their own citizens, the Germans were afraid of East Germany and the Russians. And so they had very different ideas of how secure such a thing should be. In the end, what came out is designed by committee, which is worse than anything that was ever proposed. So this was meant to be, well, the rumor has it that the Germans wanted something secure like 128 bits key length. The other ones went like, oh no, that's too secure. Let's do 64-bit key length. Because 64 brute forcing is quite an effort. Now, unfortunately, there were so many people pushing for weak standards that they then also said, oh no, this is still too secure, let's put 10 bits of the key equal to 0. So now we have an effective key length of 54. And then they decided the following was a really good idea. So here is one LFSR length 19. There's one LFSR length 22. I should draw a bit more space. So this one has some tabs and feeds back. This guy here length 22. Has some tabs, far fewer than this, and feeds back and outputs, and there's another one length 23. And then all of these guys here get added up. And then this one here is the output. The polynomials are kind of nice. They are as good as it gets. So they are x to the 19 plus x to the 5 plus x squared plus x plus 1. The 22 ones even nicer. It's x to the 22 plus x plus 1. And x to the 23, this is again 5 terms, plus x to the 15 plus x squared plus x plus 1. All of these three are primitive, so that was the one which had maximum order and, well, first of all, irreducible, all primitive. And if you have only few coefficients, that means you need very few wires to drive it. So that means it's even more efficient to compute. At every step, you only compute the sum of 4 coefficients or 2 coefficients. So they're very fast to compute. So this is certainly a nice design for hardware, and, well, the early days of cell phones, like back in the 90s, battery power was much more an issue than now. So that's a good design in that sense. They also played a bit around, so, or I should say 64 bits. Key, effective, 54 plus 0. And then there's a 22-bit frame number. So when you call your cell phone tower, they remember what packets already come in by giving it a frame number. So that's basically the initialization vector. So at the beginning, you start, each of those reads in the key. Now, each of them is shorter than the key, so what you do is you feed in the key here, and if there is already something here, you XOR the key in. So the starting of these is you shift forward all the time, and you just read in the key, and eventually they get added to it. There is some more complications, so there are some bits. So there's a middle bit here, here, and here. And yes, I know 22 is not odd, so the middle bit is slightly shifted, so it's bits 9, 10, and 10. Bits 9, 10, 10. Determine when the elements are false. Now that is in order to make this a little bit nicer. So until now we could have analyzed everything with what we just learned. Now we're trying to make it a bit more complicated, increasing the period a little bit by putting in those pieces there. Now what it does is, at every moment, it looks what's in those bits. So there's 3 values, say 2 of them are 0, 1 is 1. Then it determines the majority of those, in this case 2 zeros, 1, 1, so majority is 0. And then it advances those which agree with majority. So compute majority bit, and then we advance exactly those which agree with it. Advance those that agree. With that bit. So it means at every clock, well, majority means at least 2 of them agree with it. So it means at every clock cycle, 2 of them will advance. Sometimes 3 of them will advance. And then the sum is computed. Say these 2 advance. Then this one keeps the bit in the same position as had before. So at every moment you have a sum to compute here. At every moment it has at least 2 fresh inputs. So at least 2 advance. Now, I mentioned before that the spooks were a little too successful. Not so much inside this thing, even though this is also not a great design, it was not so surprising, but the way that GSM is using it, GSM uses A5/1 in a bad way. Namely, it ends in the numbers before encryption. And, well, we can simply guess if you guess these two guys, then you have to do 2 to the 41 guesses. Typically, we assume that we're lucky, so we assume we only have to do half of them, so 2 to the 40 guesses. And then we get the output sequence and can recover it. So we can guess, say, 2 to the 41 states for top 2, LFSRs recover the third. So we're using the first 2 because they have shorter, and then recover the third as we said earlier. So there's something that should have been obvious to everybody back then. Yes, there's a little bit of mess going on with these clocking bits, but it is not that hard to recover it. So nowadays, this thing is really not secure. There's a worse design, which is called A52, which was the EU saying, oh, well, this is for our citizens, but if you want to export it to third countries such as Iraq, they shouldn't get the good stuff. The good stuff. So this is better than another one which is broken into 2 to the 16. So this one still has like 2 to the 30 something security. There's A52 is even worse. Only 2 to the 16 security. So A52 looks more complicated, but is weaker. But at least there, they set out to design something weaker. For this one, people believe that they actually messed up. One never knows, but it is a little too insecure what came out of it, so probably it was a mess up. A52 is a very nice design against people where they were like, yeah, those guys don't deserve security. The downside is now each of your phones, well, maybe not anymore now, but until a few years ago, each phone included A52, and you could do a downgrade attack. So on Thursday, we continue with other broken crypto. So welcome to the fun side of crypto where everything breaks. So LFSRs, not totally broken unless you use them stupidly. On Thursday, we're going to do RC4.